Well, hello YouTube, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. I know it's been a while. I had actually planned to make some videos during the holiday season, and it just didn't pan out. I know everybody's probably tired of hearing me talk about how busy I always am. It's probably not a bad reason to be off of YouTube and Google+, to be sort of engaging in regular life, business life, that sort of thing. I'd actually scheduled a fair bit of time for myself off at Christmas, and a certain Volkswagen robbed me of many of those days, unfortunately. Unbillable hours, unproductive time. I mean, it's productive in the sense that I finally got the car fixed, but it was an absolute nightmare. And I'm actually probably going to schedule myself off the odd Monday in January just to kind of give myself a few long weekends to feel like I've gotten the R&R that I really require. Running a one-man automotive shop can be quite tiring. In any case, I did want to touch base with everyone and let everyone know that I am alive and comment on a couple of things. I've been trying to think about, what would I do in 2015? I'm not really one that's much for New Year's resolutions. I think they're kind of misguided in some ways. I do think that it's a good opportunity to sort of refresh one's thinking, and whatever one uses for that purpose. Their birthday, some random day, New Year's Day, whatever it be. But I think New Year's resolutions are kind of, they're kind of empirically not historically all that successful, I think. But I do think it's a good time to reflect on the year that's passed, or whatever time period that's passed, and to sort of look forward. And I've thought, what would I like my YouTube channel to be about in the future? What would I like to focus on? And I think the focus for me is on rationality and empiricism and reasonableness in anything that I'm going to critique or any discussions that I want to have. There's been some topics that I've alluded to in the past I'd like to cover if I can, but that's sort of where I'd like to go. And being on and off of YouTube as much as I have been is kind of interesting, because through some of the holidays, I have gone back on Google Plus a bit and on YouTube, and I see a lot of the same stuff going on, and it's a little bit disheartening. I've seen the discussions about drama, and even the question being asked, what to do about certain individuals that sort of draw people into drama. And I may make some videos about that in the future. Again, it is a little bit disheartening, and I don't want to be disparaging to anybody in particular here. Some people kind of make their YouTube career off of sort of commenting on a particular personality, but I think at some point you have to ask yourself, what is the message you're sending yourself by continuing to illuminate something that's never changing? And what is your real purpose there? And what is your purpose in life, I guess, if you're going to continue to make light of something that's already been made light of and that is clearly not going to change. So that's a little bit discouraging to me. I did watch a couple of interesting videos today, and it reminded me of a visit that I just had with a Jehovah's Witness, and that's probably what I'll talk most about today. I watched the Atheism is Unstoppable Atheists React channel, where they had the video where the atheists react to Atheism Leads to Suicide, which was a feature on Creation Today with Eric Hovind and some guest moron. And they use the death of Robin Williams, the suicide death of Robin Williams, to make their point, which I think is quite abhorrent. And they do the usual flip-flop stuff of saying, it's not for us to judge what was on Robin Williams' mind, et cetera, et cetera. And then they proceed to actually do that. And I don't want to talk about that because I think that's terrible. What I do want to talk about, though, is the little infomercial. They took a break during their discussion, and they did this little infomercial where Eric Hovind is speaking, and he's talking about what's going on in the mind of an atheist. And he says, atheists will say they want evidence, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They don't want evidence. And the atheists who are reacting in the Atheists React video all reacted to that as well, and they're all calling bullshit, of course. Yes, we do want evidence. And it reminded me of another video I watched, which was Atheism is a Mental Disorder, or something like that. Another cretin who professes to speak for atheists. And it's kind of interesting because he makes the case that there's all this evidence for God out there, and that God actually is in another realm, but he will He will talk to some people, and if he hasn't talked to you, that means he doesn't love you, etc., etc. So he's sort of making the case that there's all this evidence, but it's in a different realm, and if you haven't been able to visit that realm, it's because God doesn't love you. But it's a mental disorder for you not to believe in God. And it reminded me of the Jehovah's Witness that I was talking to the other day. She stopped by. It was actually an enjoyable conversation. Really, I wouldn't have minded talking to her more, except for the aforementioned time issue. And she was talking about all the evidences in the Bible. And Eric Hovind, is saying that atheists don't want evidence. This is what people do with insufficient evidence, right? So this woman was doing the same thing. She stopped by. She's talking about how the Bible is a historic book and how it's a scientifically accurate book. And she's providing me all these evidences. And when I refute said evidences, or when I let her know that the evidences that she's calling evidence are actually just anecdotes, they're unsupported, they're explainable by other phenomenon, or that they are arguments from ignorance, then she sort of reverts to, well, obviously nothing will convince you. And this is the same thing that Eric Hovind is doing, of course, in this little video where he's saying atheists don't want evidence. This is a response to atheists pointing out that certain evidence is insufficient, or that certain evidence has been refuted. The hydrologic cycle is one of the things that the Jehovah's Witness that came the other day was referring to. And I just had a post on my personal Facebook by somebody that I went to school with saying that atheists don't want this to be true because that would mean that a personal God does exist and that they would be accountable. And he was posting an article that says, Noah's Ark has been found. Why are they hiding it from us? There's always the nebulous they, which they never point out to who it is that is the they that is actively hiding this information, right? And it links to the Noah's Ark article where they, I think it might even been Joe the Plumber, his website. And they talk about how it's been found on Mount Ararat, and they've got that picture that we're all kind of familiar with of this geologic formation that kind of looks like it could be the generic shape of a boat. And then all the other things that they say they find with ground penetrating radar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't even have to go to an actual atheist or secular debunking website. You can just go to Snopes.com and actually look at the references to this. Now, of course, if I were to post that on my personal Facebook, Snopes article, pointing out the arguments from ignorance and the other things that are contained in that, most specifically that even if it were a boat, that doesn't prove God. I mean, it proves that there's a boat on a mountain somehow. It doesn't prove God. If I were to do that, then what would be leveled at me would be that charge that I just don't want to believe. And so this evidence isn't sufficient. Now, that does pose a good question for an honest person. Do you want to believe? And the honest answer to that question is no, I don't want to believe. I mentioned this to the Jehovah's Witness who was here the other day. I don't want to believe. And there, I think, are good reasons for that. The problem of evil for me is one, but I'm referring to the ultimate problem of evil, because the traditional problem of evil that we're all familiar with, that's bad enough. But to me, the ultimate problem of evil is one that's a little bit more highlighted by, I think, the Calvinists, and that is the problem of evil, which is really hell itself. The creation of vessels fitted for destruction, vessels of wrath fitted for destruction. To me, that's the ultimate problem of evil. And so, no, I would prefer that not be true. Now, there's an offshoot to that, of course. If one is being honest, and of course, if a Christian were to use my words against me, they would be doing so dishonestly because they would have to take it out of context. Because there's a part of me that says, I don't want to believe that. However, if it's true, I would want to know it. And ultimately, of course, that would mean believe it. What I would do with that is a different story, and that would take a lot of soul searching on my part. I mean, many atheists would say, and as I've alluded to with what I would call the ultimate problem of evil, which is the problem of hell, I don't know if I would or could worship that kind of a God. But I also don't know what that would look like to actually believe, and what part of it would I believe, because I think there's a portion of believing. If you were to believe in the actual God of Scripture, there's the part about him being all good, and so how do I digest that, and what do I do with that, and how do I reconcile that, and how different would I be? There are times in my life when I've gone through certain changes where I held a position. Maybe it's been a strong position and a fairly large, maybe even worldview. I don't know. And I've evolved out of that position into another, and I feel like I think differently after that. So I can't know what that would look like or what that would feel like to believe, and whether or not that would lead to actual worship. But I think the honest answer is no. I don't want to believe that. I hope, pardon the pun, I hope to hell that's not true, because of what it entails. And this is something I was trying to explain to the Jehovah's Witness lady the other day. Now, she doesn't believe in a literal hell, so that made things a little bit more difficult for me to explain. Although she believed that hell itself actually is the disconnection from God. It's actually returning to the earth, returning to dust. I think that still poses the same problem of evil in some respects, although it's definitely a lot more muted to say I'm going to create something, and if it doesn't pan out, I'm just going to turn it back into what it was before. It's certainly a lot more muted than an eternal lake of fire, torment and torture and all that sort of thing. But it was very difficult for me to get that point across to her, partially because of what her belief system actually is, that it's just a disconnection from God. But all the evidence, of course, that she provided to me was stuff that was easily explainable. She had started by saying that the Bible is a historic document and it's a scientifically accurate document. And then I said, well, for it to be scientifically accurate, of course, it would have to contain, I think, accurate knowledge of the physical world, and it wouldn't be able to contain things that are impossible, like, for instance, the sun stopping in the sky. That this would be impossible, at least in terms of things continuing, as per normal, in the event of that happening. Because, of course, what that would actually mean would be that the Earth would have had to have stopped rotating. And then she sort of was talking about, well, it's actually a historic document as well, because there are other manuscripts that have been found that are extra biblical, that reference the sun stopping in the sky at the same time period. Now, I'm not familiar with any of those, but either way, I had to point out to her that, that's not a proof of the historicity of Scripture. And then I pointed out the physical impossibilities. And she said, yes, but with God, anything is possible. And I had to point out to her that is special pleading and begging the question. And this is what ultimately leads to someone like her or someone like Eric Hovind saying, you just actually don't want evidence. Because any evidence we give you, you refute, you debunk, you claim as special pleading, you say is anecdotal. She gave me many anecdotes about, not specific even, but just saying that she's witnessed God in her own life, and so that's how she knows he's real. And I said to her, no offense, but your personal experience does not carry all that much weight to me. And, I went through, why does it take thousands of years old? There are people who've witnessed things, but they were thousands of years ago, and I'm expected in the modern age to believe that, blah, blah, blah. It's just interesting, I think, to watch when people claim to speak for someone else and claim to say that atheists actually don't want evidence. In some ways, it's true. I don't want evidence that is true. But I'm not resistant to it because I don't want it to be true. I mean, if you have evidence and it was compelling, then I would want to know that. I would want to know that. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's likely to happen. And I hope to hell it's not true. But it's a falsehood to say that atheists don't want evidence. I'm going to leave it there for today. Again, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everyone has a great 2015. I can't believe I've made it to 2015. Not because I've had any particular health issues or anything like that through my life, but I even remember when I was a kid looking forward. The year 2000 seemed to be so futuristic. I'm not even sure that I thought about 2015. The other day I was thinking, we're only a few years away from 2020, which should give us perfect hindsight, right? Thanks everyone for watching.